this is not an isolated occurrence. From what we understand, this was a Russian spy ship, probably looking at underground cables or undersea cables that make communications around the world run. And the amount of cables between the UK and the US are legion, and they keep the whole of Europe and the UK going from an internet perspective to everything else. And one of the things we know the Russians are looking at, if they could cut those cables, they cut our ability to communicate. So the reconnaissance by this ship is not unsurprisingly, it sort of happens all the time. I think what is very surprising is that we understand that lasers were fired at the Poseidon maritime surveillance aircraft, an RAF aircraft that was checking out what this ship was up to. Now, that is a heck of an escalation. Now, admittedly, these are probably only very small lasers, pocket-sized ones. What they're, presumably the aim of the Russians was to disrupt the communications of this aircraft, but also ultimately to injure the pilots. It's reasonably well known that pilots, not just Air Force pilots, but commercial pilots, have been affected by people firing lasers at them. It can injure them, it can even blind them. So, and a laser in this environment, this is a weapon. The next stage up from this would be for the Russians to fire, an air defense missile at this RAF aircraft. So I think it's really significant. What it does show, and what it really backs up, Barras, Manning and Buller, a previous head of MI5, only last month was articulating that we are already in a hybrid war with Russia. And if anybody needs any or has any doubt about this event personifies that, where we've got a Russian surveillance Secret Service ship checking out our lines of communication. And when we go to warn it off, in effect, it fires a missile to warn us off. So, yeah, I think nobody should be any doubt that President Putin and the Russians see the UK as one of its very significant enemies, if not the most significant after Ukraine. And we need to be aware of that. There's, there is no way that, as some would suggest, we should appease Putin. Putin ultimately exploits weakness, exploits appeasers, and only respects strength. So it's very important that we show the Russian strength and that we're not going to be pushed around by them.
My message to Russia and to Putin is this: we see you, we know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready.
I think he's been sort of deliberately ambiguous, and the fact that you're asking the question is personifies that. And I think, obviously his answer is very much focused to be heard in Moscow. Now, we know that these Poseidon surveillance aircraft, are sometimes armed with torpedoes and other missiles. So it may well be that he was inferring that actually, had this gone on, that aircraft could have taken out this ship. But it's also very very likely that we have a bunch of UK fighters all over the country, ready at a moment's notice to be scrambled to intercept Russian aircraft or Russian ships who are being aggressive to us. Of course, we can deal with one Russian surveillance ship. Whether we can deal with multiple attacks and all the rest of it is a different issue. But it is very important that I think that we let the Russians know that we know exactly what they're up to, and also that Putin knows that Britain is prepared to have a kinetic strike, against this sort of aggression that Russians are showing. And if we didn't, then of course they would keep going. So hopefully this is a clear message to Russia that in this particular respect, we are prepared and are prepared to actually take action rather than, sit by and let them crack on. All the time, I'm sure people who watch the news regularly will hear about, Russian surveillance aircraft coming into airspace or coming close to the UK. That has happened all the time throughout the Cold War. I think what needs to be clear coming out of the government, and to be fair to them, that they seem to be saying it, is that we won't just allow this. We're in a slightly different position than the Baltic states, who have had these drones coming over, who've had some incursion from Russian fighter jets. Now, in the UK, we're out of range of Russian fighter jets, so we're not going to see, MiGs and Su-35s, in our skies, because they haven't got the fuel to get there. We do see the Russian Bears and other long-range bombers in our skies. So I think we just need to make it absolutely clear that we won't put up with Russian aggression. And I suppose today's announcement is part of that. And hopefully the Russians will realise that Britain is serious. And one could, over the last few years, some of the actions that this government, the previous government, have done, you can see why the Kremlin might have got the impression that we just weren't interested. I think we're now beginning to show that absolutely we are interested, and whatever some people might be saying about in this country about appeasing Putin, the vast majority do not want to do that, and the government, certainly from a defence perspective, seems to be on it at the moment.